Alright, so I wanted to make a quick video showing how you load and unload maps properly in the 40 Dark Gem speedrun. Because you can't see the loading triggers that you need to hit. Now it's important to understand first like how loading maps and areas work. Within any given level, as long as you get close to an area, then it will load. Because a level just consists of a bunch of submaps that load based on the camera, like what the camera can see. So if I go over here, I don't need to pass any loading triggers to load this area over here. The camera just needs to get close to it, and that's it. However, for loading entire maps, you do need to pass through loading triggers. And that's what this script that I've enabled does. It visualizes where these loading triggers are. So for example, here are the loading triggers for loading Crocodile Swamp, the tunnel to Crocodile Swamp, and unloading it again. And you can see these little arrows that are on these planes. These indicate which direction you need to pass through them to be able to activate them. Right? The first loading trigger you have to hit in the run is this one to load the tunnel leading to Crocodile Swamp. So you just need to pass through the blue trigger like this, and then as you can see the tunnel will have loaded. You can see at the top left a list of all the maps that are loaded. So that was the easy one. Loading Crocodile Swamp is quite a bit trickier. I've obviously visualized the planes here that you need to pass through, but they're not always accurate. So for example, if I go through here, I've clearly passed through that blue trigger, which loads Crocodile Swamp, but it still hasn't loaded. So it's kind of picky, and I don't really know why, but as long as you pass like right beside these poles right here, like these sticks or whatever, like, as long as you pass right beside them like this, then Crocodile Swamp will load. It's loading in the background, you see, there we go. And that was loaded. So that's all you need to do. There's also an unload trigger for the tunnel, but you don't need to hit that, because the tunnel is so small that it doesn't really cause any problems for performance or anything. And you just teleport back. And teleporting, for the record, that just reloads all the maps like properly. So as soon as you've entered like a loading screen, you don't need to worry about what maps you have loaded, because it'll all unload and load like as the game intends it to be. So there's no issue there. So the next trigger is this one to load the ball gadget. This one is quite simple. It's just a horizontal line load trigger like this, and all you need to do is charge into here. Boom. Again, that's quite picky, but as long as you go pretty much like right below the ball gadget, you will be fine. It's not too precise. Now, this is the tricky one. So right as you arrive at Coastal Remains, you're supposed to glide down here, get swim in air, and then glide back up, swim back up here, and continue the route. The problem is that on GameCube, this can easily crash the game, and the reason for that is because of that load trigger. Like load Watery Tomb. You load the area where you fight in Neptune. And that's kind of a problem, because then it'll just sit in memory and hog up the game's resources, and that'll lead to a crash. So the way to avoid that is just to avoid the load trigger. So like just glide around here and not hit it like that. And then you won't. It doesn't matter if you swim the other way, because as I said, loading triggers only trigger when you swim in one direction. So as you can see, I'm completely fine. There's no risk of a crash. Now real quick, if you do accidentally load the map still, like if you swim really close here, and as you can see now it's loading in the background. Whoops. That can sometimes happen. But what you will notice is that there are unload triggers for the map here as well. So if you accidentally do load the map, which you might be able to see by the arches loading in the background, I'm not sure. But then you will just need to make sure to swim very close to the floor here, so that you can hit the unload trigger, so that the map doesn't take up space in the background. And that's all. This is a small one. It's not very hard to hit this one, but this is a very relatively new strat. So right after you get the dark gem up there, you go and get this swim in air here, and then you go over here and go out of bounds. Then we go over here, and then we don't have to go through this whole tunnel system or all these puzzle areas. But you do need to go back and bounce here, if nothing else for just like the safety of hitting this loading trigger. That's like the main point here. If you don't hit this one and just swim over the tunnel, then the elevator won't load. So as you can see now it's loaded. You can see all the elevator load triggers in the background. So after you've beaten Neptune, you go get the swim in air, of course, and then you have to hit this load trigger to load Coastal Remains again. It's quite big, it's not very hard to hit. Like if you just swim under this wheel right here, right after getting the swim in air, you will be in the perfect path to just get to the teleporter immediately. Normally we would unload Watery Tomb again by hitting the loading trigger, but it doesn't really matter in this case, because we spend so little time in Coastal Remains that it's usually fine. As you can see, it loads fine. Although you do have to be a bit careful there, the game can still crash. If you really want to be safe, you can go along the tunnel and unload the map again. But usually doesn't crash there. This one isn't too relevant for 40 Dark Gem, because in 40 Dark Gem you get that Dark Gem over there, and then you swim while in bounds and load Molten Mount normally. But I think this is still pretty good to know. So if I go over here and load Molten Mount, so now it's loaded. You have to make extra sure that you hit the unload trigger right here. If you don't unload Stormy Beach, then the game will really like struggle once you've tried to load the elevator down to Magma Falls. And that can easily cause a crash. So just make sure you swim through this red plane right here to unload Stormy Beach again. Now this one is quite tricky. So in any percent, you would hit this loading trigger and then go down, swim down the elevator. In 40 Dark Gem it's a bit different because we need the checkpoint up here. But you can just swim into that and then go out of bounds. And then down here, you see the load triggers down there. We need to hit the first blue one. Right? So if we hit that blue one, and then we need to make sure we also hit the red unload trigger for Molten Mount. That will ensure that the game doesn't completely crap itself when it's loading this area, because otherwise it'll just have too much in memory. So now you know where those are, and now it shouldn't crash when you enter the shop, because that's an issue. If you do miss that unload trigger, then the game has a pretty high chance of crashing if you enter the shop. So you will want to just swim above it, so you activate the shop, and then just swim down into the lava to Death Abuse, and respawn it back up there, right? And again, when you enter the loading screen, everything will just be sorted out by the game. So as you can see, now the Molten Mount and the elevator is loaded, and there's no issue.